November, I started taking, it was 2 milligrams sublingually underneath my tongue of a hormone estrogen. And then I started to dress as myself when I felt like me a little bit, you know? And 6 months later, I ended up homeless.
This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast. What's later in life?
Well, later in life, I had actually hurt myself. My wife, at the time that I was married to, Kathy, we had decided that we wanted to move from Massachusetts. We were just tired of it. We were tired of the cold weather, this, that, whatever. And she wanted to change. So did I. And that there became my, quote, gypsy lifestyle. And so...
Gypsy's a protected class now. You can't say gypsy anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Which I'm going to say gypsy all day long just because
Oh,
I can't
okay.
say it.
I'm going to say it because that's the only way people recognize somebody who moves around a lot. So, and I don't mean any
nomads,
offense, but-
gypsies.
Yeah, you can't say
Yeah,
it.
nomad. Call it a nomad, right?
Yeah.
And so we moved to Arizona, and when I moved to Arizona, I mean, just life changed for everything. But unfortunately, I'd hurt myself driving. I was one of those stubborn guys that tried to man up all the fucking time. You know, I didn't know how to take a break, so I always pushed my body beyond limits. Yeah, right, exactly. You know, you pop in. I remember when we got to Arizona, I was drinking those big, tall, 32-ounce monsters, popping frickin' no dose. Like, I get there, my heart's going, you know, so hard, and it's like, holy shit. Like, I felt like I was on speed, for Christ's sakes. And so, I didn't have a drug problem at this time, but I did hurt a nerve in my right leg.
Oh.
Yeah, and I put up with it for a long time. And then I finally went to see a doctor about it. It was so... God, it was so intense, like to the point I couldn't even stand up anymore, you know? And so I went to see a doctor, and that's when the Percocet started.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was taking one every 6 to 8 hours or as needed. Well, one became two.
You're
Two
probably
became
talking
three.
late 90s, maybe early 2000s?
No, I'm talking early 2000s.
So the doctors were at this point were just prescribing.
They were still prescribing them, yeah.
It became 1 hour.
It did, but after about 3 at a whack, I noticed that she went away.
Really?
She went away. It instantly suppressed her. But then after a while, 3 wasn't enough, so I take another.
Well, you got to be careful saying that. Some of these idiots out there are going to give people who want to transition some Percocet, try to make it go away.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because once you go clean, you're fucked. So,
I want to step back in time a little bit. You're still having these feelings like you're a female inside.
yes.
Did you ever once think to yourself, well, maybe I'm just gay?
I did, actually. I did. In my early 20s, I tried to be with a man just to see if I was gay. I couldn't do it.
Hurt?
No, I couldn't get over the stigma of being a man.
Yeah.
Men don't do that. Blah blah blah. Exit only. Yada yada yada. You know that shit.
But
Tough guy.
You said you did not like your penis.
Right.
Was it a hate for all penises or just yours?
Oh, I hated my penis. I don't care what anybody else does with theirs. I couldn't care less, you know.
Okay.
But I mean, it was just maybe that was the case for me. Maybe I was gay. I don't know. You know, I mean, you have all these feelings, you don't know what they are. I mean, like I said, puberty was a nightmare for me. I didn't know what the hell to do. You know, my friends are telling me how they want to have babies, this, that, the other, and I'm thinking, well, fuck, I can't do that. What the hell? Why am I like this? You know, and every psychologist I ever went to, my parents tried to put me in therapy. My father, in specifically, back then, you know, HIPAA didn't exist, so my father always found everything I talked about anyway. But you know, they would always tell me, you know, oh, it's perfectly okay to wonder what it's like to be the other gender. It's totally fucking normal. Have either one of you ever wondered what it's like to be a fucking girl?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
No.
And so that's what they would tell me. And
It seems like a lot of work. I'm going to tell you that.
it is a lot of work.
It seems like women got the raw deal. You got the long hair, which is a pain in the ass in hot weather. All right? Yeah.
Fair enough.
You have to shave everything. Well, you know.
Laser's wonderful.
But and you got to do makeup and stuff. It just seems like a lot.
I spent an hour getting ready before I ever came here.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a lot of
Took
work.
me about 3 minutes.
All that hair gel you had to put in.
Took her about 3 minutes too. She's the same way. She doesn't like makeup and all that stuff. I don't blame her.
Yeah, it just seems like a lot of work. But I'm sorry to digress with
No.
that. But that's a question when you're wondering where you sit in this world. Well, if I feel like a female inside, everything's telling me I'm gay.
I thought I might have been, but I remember I had hooked up with somebody, and we pretty much got our clothes off, and I tried a few things here and there, and it's like, yeah, this isn't for me, dude. And I let it up, but I couldn't get over. I couldn't get over that macho-ness, you know, that fuck that, I can't do this shit, you know.
Just stuff that your father beat into your head.
Yes.
So, your first kiss, okay, your first kiss with either a man,
It was a
woman,
girl.
it was a girl. You feel, there. It's hard to explain, but everybody will know what I'm talking
The fireworks.
about.
Yes.
The spark. Okay, this is for me or this isn't for me. Because I've heard this from other gay men we've had on where they've tried to go with women and it just didn't feel right.
Right.
Mark.
You feel like pressured into it almost.
Right.
Yeah.
So our friend Mark, he's like, yeah, it's just I tried. It just wasn't there for me. I just had no interest in it. So I imagine it was the same thing for you. You can't fit the round peg into a square hole, and that's what you were trying to do.
Yes. I'm going to turn the clock back a little bit, and this is a real trigger warning for your audience. Back when I was 11 years old, I talked my father into letting me volunteer at a pet store that wasn't far from my home, Park Hill Plaza. And it was a cute little pet store. They sold birds and puppies and just little stuff. And I go up there after school, I'm just trying to stay away from my father. Anything I could fucking do to get away from this man. And I went up there and I volunteered for a little while. Well, after a little while, the man raped me. He sexually molested me and raped me.
Really?
It was brutal. It was the most brutal thing I'd ever had. But the problem with that is I was afraid to tell my father. I couldn't tell my father.
How old were you?
I was 11 years old.
And, Jesus.
We were feral. Things were different back then. We could do whatever the fuck we wanted.
Yeah, but rape is rape.
I don't disagree with you.
And
Exactly.
and what was his justification for doing this?
I didn't ask him.
He just took it by force.
Well, he started molesting me first, even after I'd heard stories on TV about all that stuff, and I'm
After
like,
school specials?
Yeah, those. The more you know.
Yeah.
Grooming.
Right. And I didn't really think anything of it. I'd be like, that never happened to me, blah, 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 when I'm younger. And of course it did. And I didn't even think about it. It just fucking happened. And I didn't think anything of it, and
So this guy just does what he does to you.
yes.
And you I'm sure at 11, 12 years old, you're crying, you're screaming, you're trying to get away, you're trying to do anything you can, or do you just stay silent? Just let it happen.
I kind of stayed silent. I was so used to getting beat, to be honest.
Yeah.
I just thought this was normal to be treated like a fucking asshole. I was just so beat all my life, so
You never told anybody about it?
I never told anybody. Just her.
That's a pretty awful story.
Yeah, it was so traumatic. I actually tucked it away. I didn't really resurface until about 3.5 years ago.
And I don't even know how old you are now. I know
I'm 46.
You're 46. So 3 years, mid early 40s. That's usually about the time sexual assault as a child starts to rear its head for a lot of people.
Yeah. Hormones really made it come out hard.
Yeah, and you've had to deal with that in your adult life.
Yes.
Yeah, that sucks.
It's something you haven't dealt with your whole life. Now in your adult life.
Well, to be honest, I've yet to really deal with it.
And that's the type of person who would do something like that. Probably didn't even. If you were to ask him if he's straight or gay, he'd be straight. Probably married.
You're probably right, yeah.
Yeah, you're probably married.
Because it's not about sex.
I think the man's still alive today, if I'm not mistaken.
There's a special place in hell for him.
Yeah, exactly.
There's always a special place in hell for people who do that to children.
I don't disagree with you.
The devil's waiting.
Yeah. So they're going to get his just desserts, but that's absolutely awful. And since in your adult life, have you told your mother about it?
My mother actually found out when I came out on TikTok about it.
Really?
Yeah.
What was her reaction?
She was kind of shocked. She had no idea. She didn't really make a whole big thing of it because, I'm 40 years old. What's she going to do at this fucking point, right?
Exactly.
So, but she didn't make a big deal about it. I just remember getting a phone call about it. We talked about it a little bit, and she goes, "Why didn't you tell me?" It's like, because I was afraid to tell everybody. I didn't want to be that kid.
So if I learned anything,
Well, it's got to be an embarrassing thing too. I mean,
Well, yeah.
even to come out and say it.
I was a tiny kid. I've always been tiny. I mean, you guys see me now. I'm only 5'5", 5 feet, 5.5 inches. I weigh 168 pounds. I've always been small. All the males in my family, amazingly enough, are over 6 feet tall. My brother's 6'1". My father was 6'2". All my uncles were over 6 feet. I'm the smallest person with a penis in my family, for Christ's sake. It's just always been like that.
you were.
I was.
You
Yes, I was.
So one of our sponsors is that woman named Sherry Alsop, who's an incest survivor, and I've really learned a lot from her on dealing with sexual assault victims. Like you said, like your mother asked you, why didn't you run away? Why didn't you do this? Well, I was fucking 11 or 12.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just trying to survive, and when you go through serious trauma, especially as a child, you just shut down.
Yes.
Like, why didn't you fight back? I would have.
Fuck was I gonna do? He was like 6 feet tall. What was I gonna do?
Clark said the same thing
Yeah.
too. He
People-
just shut right down.
You just shut down, and people would say, "Well, he made me blow him." Well, why didn't you bite his dick off? Well, because I wasn't.
Wasn't thinking.
Wasn't
You
thinking
don't
about
think.
that. No.
You're scared to death. You don't think. You just lock up. You freeze.
Oh gosh. So you have
You ever fear something? You get that weakness in your legs, like you want to run, but you're so afraid you
knees feel
can't.
wobbly.
Yeah, that. It's the same fucking feeling. You're
Every
so
time I
fucking
fly.
scared. Well, I love the fly. It doesn't bother me. But that was the feeling I had. I shut down. I didn't know what to do. I just panicked. My whole brain just fucking shut off.
Now, fast forward a little bit.
Yeah.
You're living your life. You're doing the best you can. You're married. You have
I had
children.
kids, 3 kids.
You have 3 kids. You're living everything normal. When did this inside in you start to become on the outside? When did you first? Do you remember the first time you dressed as a woman?
I do actually. I had separated from my wife at that point. We just weren't. I was on drugs, really heavy, and I wasn't.
No wonder.
Yeah,
Yeah, no kidding.
I was on a lot of drugs, and I wasn't really attentive to her. You know, she started cheating on me, this, that, the other, and I don't fucking blame her. It ain't her fucking fault. You know, I mean, I was in my head and
Lexi,
paying no attention to her.
I'm going to tell you something. That is one of the most mature, intelligent things I think anybody I've sat across has said. I really admire what you just said about your ex-wife right there.
Yeah, I can't blame her. I was the least attentive husband that I possibly could have been.
So that's a big ownership right there.
Yeah.
So
I take full ownership on that one. Obviously, it takes 2. I get that, but she could have sat down and talked to me, whatever. But no, I take ownership of that. That was my problem.
Yeah.
So you're separated from your wife. Do you just like throw on a skirt?
No, actually, I hadn't even done it yet. I did not dress as a woman until I got clean off of drugs. I had OD'd twice, and I was 33 years old. I had seen something about being trans on TV, whatever. And I'm like, Jesus Christ! It was like watching myself. I don't remember what it was. It was Dateline, Nightline, whatever the fuck it was. But I remember watching it and going, wow, that's really me. You know,
Were the drugs hiding her?
the drugs were definitely hiding her, and they were suppressing her really good.
Yeah.
And like I said, I had OD'd twice, and then one morning, I don't know what the fuck happened, but one morning I woke up, and I looked at my hand for whatever reason. I turned the light on that morning. I used to just take them like half a fucking sleep, 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock, whatever it was. And that morning I turned the light on, and I remember looking at my hand. I had 15 10 milligram Percocets in my hand, 15 of those fucking things. And I thought to myself, Lex, what the fuck are you doing to yourself? You're dying, dude. You know.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was my epiphany moment. That was my holy fuck. So I went to rehab. I was in rehab about 3 weeks or so, and when I got out, I fell into a wicked, deep, dark depression, and that's when she came out, big time. She was not going to be shut the fuck up. That's it. She's out. And so I talked to the girl that I was with at the time, and she seemed all on board about supporting me, this, that, and whatever. We actually picked up and moved to Massachusetts because Massachusetts Mass Health would have paid for all of the care that I needed. So we picked up. We got rid of the house that we were renting. She had full custody of her kids. I had my kids, and we moved. We moved to Massachusetts, and October of 2016 is when I started my transition with Fenway Health. And a month later, I started Hormones. And I first remember dressing, it was about the time I started taking hormones. I wouldn't do anything until I could do something, no matter what. Didn't matter what it was. I wasn't going to be me until I could be me. Because up until I was 30, I had no idea you could even transition. Like, I didn't even know it was a thing because all the psychologists I ever talked to never, ever brought it up. And so October 2016, I go to Fenway Health. We talked. They put me on spironolactone, which is a testosterone suppressant. Back in the 1950s, it was given for blood pressure.
So you went in full bore on this.
I did. Yeah, I mean, like I said, she was supporting me. I mean, everything was good. We had talked to the kids. The kids were all right, and so we were going to do this, And so November, I started taking, it was 2 milligrams sublingually underneath my tongue of a hormone estrogen. And then I started to dress as myself when I felt like me a little bit, And 6 months later, I ended up homeless. Yeah.
Kind of hard to go through transition and be homeless.
It was, but I continued.
So when you walk out the first time with female outfit on, presenting as female, you're like, oh, this is it.
I
This is,
felt
was it-
incredibly stupid.
Because it wasn't a relief or anything like that? You
It
just
was for me personally, but of course, me being me and me having, being raised the way I was, like, wow, what does everybody else think? And I still think like that a lot, and she'll tell you about that. I still think like that a lot. I always worry about what everybody else thinks, but yet I don't give a fuck what anybody else thinks, which is the crazy part.
It's what you think.
You're right. You're right. But I mean, it's insane. So she actually ended up leaving me anyway. That's a whole nother story for a whole nother show. But she ended up leaving me. I was homeless for about a year. I lived in my car, my truck, with my dog, my little dog Taco.
Where were your kids at this point?
My daughter was living with her grandmother at the time because she wanted to go to the high school that she was going to, and if she had lived with me, she couldn't have because it was too far away. And my son was living with me, going to that school, in that town because I kept driving because I worked in that town, so it wasn't a big deal. I just dropped him off. I'd pick him up in the afternoon when I was out. He'd go to his grandmother's in the meantime. Life was great. I mean, after I went homeless, I had to drop him off. It was the hardest fucking thing for me to do was drop my son off. It's like, here I am, I'm taking care of him for the last, 4, 5 years, 6, 7, 8 years, whatever it was. And now I've got to drop him off at his mother's and tell his mother, I can't take care of him. I need you to watch him. That was probably one of the hardest moments of my life. Fuck the transition. That wasn't bad. But dropping off my kid, that was the worst.
At your core, you're still a parent.
That's right.
All right. And you still love your kids.
Absolutely.
And the last thing you ever want to do to your kids is disappoint them.
I would do anything for my kids
Yeah.
today. And
Right.
that fucks my parenting later on in life. But I would do anything for my kids today, anytime.
So you're homeless, trying to still continue with the transition.
Yes.
How's it going for you? Is it working?
Well, I mean, I'm doing all right. I mean, I wasn't eating much. I mean, I couldn't afford to eat. I could barely afford to drive. I was eating once every 3 days, but at least I was driving. And I was
Keep
drinking.
your girlish figure that way.
Yeah. Well, by the time I was done being homeless, I was like 150 pounds. I was really light and skinny. And after about a year, I got attached to a girl who I met on plentyoffish.com, and I grabbed on the very first thing that would show me any sort of love, because I spent all that time just trying to find a home. I tried selling my body just to eat. I mean, anything I could just to get a fucking meal. I was so hungry.
To men or women?
I didn't care.
Really?
I didn't care. I just stand out downtown somewhere, anywhere I could.
Desperation will do weird things to you.
It will. And the only thing that stopped me was a priest, actually, pastor. He walked up to me that night and he said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Well, I'm hungry. I got to eat, He goes, "Well, I'm blah, blah, blah from such and such a church." He goes, "How about I buy you a dinner?" And so he bought me a dinner and he gave me $100. He said, "Don't go sell yourself." And so I didn't. And I was able to just continue to move place to place to place, just kind of working at little mom and pop shops, I was a mechanic, so I was little mom and pop shops, just doing little jobs here, little jobs there, just enough to move to the next place, And like I said, I grabbed the first thing that gave me any sort of attention, and that would be really bad for me because it ended up being an abusive relationship. She was physically, mentally, and emotionally abusive. Used my transition against me quite a bit. And so I was with her for a few years. And then in late 2018, I decided, you know what? I'm going to detransition.
This episode was just too much to put into one full hour. So we're going to break it up into 2. Thank you for watching part 1. Part 2 is coming up right now. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and follow us on all social media. That's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn.
OnlyFans.
Follow Mike at Mike_Falaise. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson. And of course, follow the Suffering Podcast. Stay tuned for next week. Part 2 is coming right up.
You're not going to want to miss it.